Jones is a killer in every way that you can be. When the stuff was going on during COVID and there was riots and people were spray painting, Jon Jones went into town and was taking spray cans out of people's hands and slapping them and saying, "Go home."
The kind of silence that comes when even the harshest critics run out of ways to deny you. He's not chasing GOAT conversations. He's writing them. And the pen he uses is dipped in pain, precision, and prophecy. Every move from here is legacy defined. There's no margin for error, no time for slip-ups. And that's exactly how Jon Jones likes it. Sharp, dangerous, final. For fans who grew up watching his rise, this version of Jon is unsettling. Not because he's worse, but because he's better. More deliberate, more calculating. Like a predator who no longer wastes energy on proving his roar. He only bites when it matters. And when he bites, he breaks bone. This isn't a comeback tour, it's a reckoning. A silent march through the ruins of his past toward the final conquest. Whether it ends in glory or collapse doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that every second he spends in that cage feels like borrowed time. And Jon Jones has always been at his most dangerous when the clock is running out. Every training session now is spiritual. Every round, a battle against age, doubt, and destiny. He doesn't move like a 35-year-old man with a history of chaos. He moves like a ghost that refuses to die. Coaches whisper that he's more focused than ever, that he's obsessed with tape, that he studies his opponents like prey. This isn't about hype anymore. This is ritual. This is legacy warfare. And those close to him know the deeper Jon walks into the darkness, the closer he gets to something untouchable. Something that doesn't just scare opponents, but the sport itself. He is both warning and prophecy. A living contradiction. The man who had it all and lost himself. The man who burned his reputation to the ground and then built a new empire from the ashes. He didn't walk the clean road. He carved a brutal trail through betrayal, chaos, and resurrection. And in doing so, he became something rarer than a hero. He became myth. Not the kind you tell children before bed. The kind whispered about in locker rooms, in gyms, and late-night conversations between fighters who know what real fear smells like. Jon Jones isn't just a fighter. He's folklore with fists. There will come a day when the cage closes for the last time. When the lights dim and Jon walks out not as a champion, but as a man. But that day isn't today. And maybe it's not tomorrow either. Because something still simmers beneath his calm exterior. A storm not yet spent. A war not yet over. The UFC can crown as many champions as it wants, but they all live in Jon's shadow. And shadows don't fade under spotlight, they stretch. He isn't chasing immortality, he already has it. He's just finishing the story. And stories like his don't end quietly. And so, the world waits. For the next headline, the next war, the next masterpiece of violence. Because with Jon Jones, you never know if you're watching brilliance or madness, or both. That's the cost of greatness born from chaos. That's the price of becoming a legend while still being a man. And as the next challenger steps up, one question echoes through every gym, every arena, every whispering crowd. What happens when the man who's seen the bottom decides to climb one last time? Whatever the answer is, one thing is certain. It won't be safe, and it won't be silent. In a single performance, Jon didn't just silence the world. He reminded it. Greatness isn't always clean. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it limps. Sometimes it bleeds. But it always finds a way back to the throne. Critics tried to diminish the victory, said Gain was unprepared, said the division was weak, but deep down, they knew. They saw the way Jon moved, the way he controlled, the way he stalked like a phantom who had been waiting years to hunt again. This wasn't luck. This wasn't timing. This was inevitability. Jon Jones doesn't win by chance. He wins because losing is not written in his DNA. He might self-destruct. He might burn bridges. But when he fights, he writes history with violence. And as the bodies fall, the whispers begin again. What if he's still the best? What if he was always the best? Behind every triumph is a shadow. And Jon's shadow is darker than most. He knows his name will never be clean. That the record will always carry stains. That some fans will never forgive. But he also knows something else. In this brutal world of cage fighting, purity doesn't crown kings. Ruthlessness does. And in the darkest corners of the sport, where pain becomes currency and fear becomes fuel, Jon Jones is still the richest man alive. He doesn't fight to be loved, he fights because he was born for war. And war doesn't care about redemption, it only respects results. He is a paradox, a fallen angel with the hands of a god, a tactician and a wild card, a student of the game and a destroyer of its rules. Every time they count him out, he returns with something more frightening: experience. He's not fighting for approval anymore, he's fighting to remind time itself that he's not a chapter, he's the whole book. And as the heavyweight division braces for his next move, one truth remains. Jon Jones doesn't need to be undefeated to be undeniable. He is chaos made flesh, a legacy written in scars. And the scariest part? He's still not finished. The echoes of his past still trail him like a curse that won't loosen its grip. Every press conference is haunted by questions that don't pertain to takedown defense or reach advantage. They ask about DUIs, about probation, about hit and runs and test results, about why a man so blessed insists on walking through fire barefoot. But Jon just smiles. Because while the world is busy analyzing his flaws, he's studying their techniques, breaking down angles, plotting paths to their jugular. He's not here to play clean. He's here to dominate. And he knows the uglier his path, the more terrifying his victories. Jon never wanted to be your hero. He only ever wanted to be your nightmare. Even among legends, his resume reads like a graveyard of greatness. Vitor Belfort, Chael Sonnen, Rashad Evans, Glover Teixeira. The list stretches long and brutal. These weren't just wins. These were dismantlings. Moments where time stood still, and even the fiercest warriors looked mortal in his presence. And yet, as terrifying as his record is, what's more chilling is the thought that we've never seen his ceiling. That every time he returns, he adapts, evolves, reinvents. The fighter he is today could devour the fighter he was 5 years ago. And that's why fear still lives in the eyes of those who stand across from him. Not because of who he was, but because of what he still might become. He talks less now, smiles differently. There's a strange calm to him, like a man who's no longer trying to prove anything, just finish something. The hunger is different. It's not about money or belts. It's about silence. Silence from critics, silence from doubters, silence from his own chaos. He doesn't need to scream to be heard. His fists speak volumes. His eyes, once wild, now burn cold. Like he's already accepted who he is. Not a martyr, not a villain. Just a man with unfinished business, with violence left in his hands, and history still wet with his fingerprints. That type of peace is terrifying, because when a monster accepts itself, it stops hesitating. The heavyweight landscape is trembling. Names like Stipe Miocic, Sergey Pavlovich, Tom Aspinall, they're all circling like sharks sensing blood in the water. But Jon is no wounded animal. He's the apex predator that let them believe he was gone. And now he watches the throne with the patience of a king who knows his crown isn't borrowed. It's buried deep in bone and legacy. These contenders are strong, fast, hungry, but they've never stood across from a mind like his. Jon doesn't just beat opponents. He invades them, lives in their rhythm, dismantles their patterns, and leaves them questioning their own identity. But Jon knows the clock is ticking. His body has miles. His soul has scars. This comeback isn't infinite, it's surgical. One fight at a time, one statement per battle. And when he finally walks away, he doesn't want applause. He wants silence. There was a time when the world thought he was finished. A cautionary tale, a man consumed by his demons, lost in the echoes of his own legend. Yet somehow, here he is, rising again like smoke from a wildfire, refusing to vanish into the ashes. For Jon Jones, redemption was never just a path, it was a war. A war with the world, with expectations, and most of all, with himself. Every time they tried to bury him under the rubble of controversy, he clawed his way out with bruised fists and blood-stained pride. But this isn't just about survival anymore, this is about reclaiming the throne. Not as the man he used to be, but as something darker, sharper, more dangerous. Jon didn't come back to remind people who he was. He came back to prove what no one believed anymore, that the king was never dethroned, only dormant. They called him the greatest talent the UFC had ever seen, a savant of violence, a maestro of destruction. Yet for every dominant victory inside the cage, there was an equally chaotic storm outside it. Arrests, bans, substance tests. The media wrote obituaries for his legacy more times than he could count. But Jon didn't care. He never needed the world to love him. He just needed the cage. And when he stepped back into it, stripped of the lights, the sponsors, the fake applause, what remained was something primal, something terrifying. A man who had tasted his own downfall and spat it back in the face of fate. He was no longer the prodigy, no longer the golden child. He was the villain in his own saga, and yet he was still winning. From the beginning, he was different. A skinny kid with long limbs and scary eyes who could bend reality inside the octagon. When he first entered the UFC, they didn't know what to make of him. He threw spinning elbows like he was born in a hurricane, tossed seasoned veterans like rag dolls, and moved like his bones didn't follow human rules. There was something eerie in how easily he dismantled legends. Mauricio Shogun Rua, Quinton Rampage Jackson, Lyoto Machida. Names etched in granite, erased by the long arms of a boy with a predator's calm. But Jon wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing domination. Not just to win, but to break. To make opponents question themselves mid-fight. To crush their belief before he crushed their bodies. But even as his dominance grew, so did the darkness. With every title defense, his empire expanded, and so did the chaos behind the scenes. He became the youngest champion in UFC history, yet his life outside the cage unraveled like a Greek tragedy. Hit-and-run accidents, cocaine scandals, suspensions. Fans watched in disbelief as their hero spiraled out of control. But Jon never begged for sympathy. He embraced the villain role like a second skin. If the world wanted a monster, he'd become the worst one they'd ever seen. Yet beneath the headlines and handcuffs, the fighter inside him never left. He trained, he studied, he waited. And when the world turned its back, he sharpened his teeth in silence. The rivalry with Daniel Cormier was more than personal. It was biblical. A tale of two titans. One the disciplined Olympian, the other a gifted outlaw. Their first fight was a storm of violence and emotion, a boiling cauldron of hatred that spilled into every press conference, every stare down, every word. Jon beat him, and then beat him again. But controversy followed like a shadow. Failed drug tests stripped away official victories, blurred the lines between legend and scandal. Still, even when the record books placed asterisks beside his name, the footage didn't lie. Jon dismantled Cormier like a surgeon of violence. It wasn't just physical, it was psychological. He broke the unbreakable, and that haunted the world more than any failed test. Years passed. The world moved on. New champions rose. New stars took the spotlight. And for a while it seemed Jon Jones was gone forever. Just another wasted talent in the graveyard of what could have been. But greatness doesn't fade. It hides. It waits. And when the heavyweight division began to rumble with opportunity, he emerged. Not as the same fighter, but as a different beast. Bulked up. Silent. Focused. This wasn't a comeback. It was a declaration. He wasn't done. He was just changing skin. From light heavyweight king to heavyweight executioner, it wasn't about belts anymore. It was about legacy. A darker, heavier, more brutal chapter, waiting to be written in bone and blood. When he stepped into the cage against Cyril Gane, the world held its breath. Could he really do it? Could he carry all that chaos, all that weight, into a new division and still reign? The answer came in minutes. Jon didn't just win, he made it look easy. Clinical, cold, terrifying. Gane was no rookie. He was fast, technical, dangerous. But Jon wrapped around him like a virus, choking out doubts, choking out critics, choking out the past.